We're in a series in Colossians called The New Normal, and as we've worked our way through it, we've come to a section that was on marriage. And so last week we talked about the different roles that are there between a man and a woman and how that kind of plays itself out. And this week we wanted to try to get really practical in terms of some things that we could share about being great lovers and best friends. Now, even saying that to you this morning with my wife up here is a little intimidating. First, to share the microphone with her is
Great.
great. It's great. It's great. What am I supposed to say next? No. But it's also, we want to make sure that you understand with a little bit of a disclaimer, we don't come up here and think by any means that our marriage is perfect or that we've got all the answers for you. And so we just want to say right up front that we're just sharing the journey that we're on, and we wanted to have a dialogue with you this morning. We also want to include the opportunity for you to ask questions of us, and so we've got a text number that you can, as we're talking, you can text to that number, and we'll try to get to your questions at the end. If Dana's able to manage her time well while she's up here, we'll do that. So we want to talk to you about some things. First, we want to talk to you about three things that we believe you really need to know or being in the process of knowing to be great lovers. And then about four things that we think you need to make sure you're in the process of knowing, not only to be best friends with your spouse, but to be best friends with anyone. Now, we also understand that in this process, there's lots of different places in the room in terms of where they are relationally. There are some who are married, and they're thinking, this will be fun, let's watch them fight. And there are others who say, I'm not married. In fact, I don't even want to really hear about marriage. And there are some who say, oh, I can't wait to be married. And anyway, we understand that, and we're not up here saying, hurry up. For those of you who are single, hurry up and get married and become somebody. That is not what we are saying at all. We don't think that's a biblical perspective towards singleness, and we celebrate singleness here. It's just that the passage that we've been working our way through speaks of marriage, and we want to try to do a good job at it. And we also want to be, hopefully, the principles that we bring up will be good enough and have applications for you regardless of where you are. So we'll talk about, first, love languages, fears, and passions. And we're going to do it a little bit differently. We've never done it this way. We've used this material before, but she's going to describe to you my love languages, and I'm going to try to describe to you hers.
So this comes from the book by Gary Chapman called The 5 Love Languages. If you're not familiar with it, I just encourage you to get it and study it. It really is helpful for us when we began to understand this a little bit more. There are 5 love languages, and always when we've done this before, Steve had 2 primary ones, I had 2 primary ones, and then there was one that was kind of just not that for either one of us. Well, Steve's changed now. He's decided he has 3 love languages. So I'm kind of, trying to catch up with what really as I thought about this, I thought once you get your primary love languages fulfilled and your partner, your spouse understands that a little bit more, then sure, we can add on more and more, can't we? Because they're not something that all of us wouldn't want all 5 of these. But those primary ones, if they're not fulfilled in our lives, then we don't really feel loved the way that we should. Oftentimes, we express love to other people the way we receive love best. And so if I did that to Steve, then he would be getting languages that he doesn't really hear and understand as much. And the same would be true for me because ours are different. And so it's really great to understand your own love languages, but understand those of your spouse or your friend or your kid, because they need to feel love the way that it expressed to them in that way that it's their language. So the first one is receiving gifts, and this is Steve's new love language. Really great one to have around Christmas time, But I'm in the process of learning about this one for him. But the thing of it is sometimes we think, sometimes when you get a gift from someone, whether it is something that's purchased or made or a gift of time, it just so expresses love to you. It's not the amount of money, it's the thought that goes behind it. But sometimes you can get kind of weird and you think, oh, well, that seems a little, getting gifts is my love language. If God's created you that way, or I think a lot of times it's how we received love as a child, kind of forms these in us, then express that and know that one. So I'm learning this one even more because the other, hopefully, 2 love languages of Steve's are a little bit more fulfilled. And so now we can splurge on this giving gifts. But I'll tell you about it next year and see how we've done on that one. His 2 primary love languages, though, are words of affirmation is the next one. And this is speaking words, writing words, being able to verbalize how special the person is, how honored you feel, and how good of a job that they're doing and the things that they're doing. And Steve needs to hear that from me. Honestly, I'm not really very good at this, and I've had to learn because my family of origin, where I came from, we did not express love verbally, and then the next one, we didn't do it physically either. So I've had to learn what that looks like. In fact, I'm motivated out of guilt, so to encourage me and say, way to go, you've done a great job, is something I like, but I'm not usually that motivated from it. So I found myself keeping back those words of affirmation because I wanted him to keep doing, good at what he was doing. I wanted him to keep loving me the way he was and all that. But I felt like if I said, hey, way to go, then he would say, oh, I've finished, I've accomplished it, I don't need to keep going. And so I found myself holding back those things instead of motivating him with those words of affirmation to continue doing the things that he was doing really well. So I've had to learn what that looks like for him. And then the 3rd love language, which was another primary one for Steve, is physical touch. Now it is for a lot of men in certain realms, but women too. But for us, my family, we didn't hug one another. We didn't verbally say, I love you much. I knew I was loved by one of my love languages, which Steve will tell you a lot about in a minute. But being able to, really understand and to know how much that communicated my love to Steve was hard. And then women, I'm just going to be really honest. Sometimes when we give physical touch to our husbands wanting to say, I love you and I hug you and great, let's sit down and cuddle and watch the football game together so I can show you how much I love you, it doesn't stop there. And the expectation continues to go and so up for the men. And so I also found myself holding that back, because all I wanted to do was cuddle and watch the football game. And so Steve wasn't always getting what he... Steve
Bummer.
wasn't always getting what I know. But he didn't get what he needed because we needed to continue to converse about what does this look like so that I can express physical love to you in lots of different ways, and that it didn't always have to lead to intimacy. So.
It only makes sense, and I think the Hollywood version of love is much more the physical touch and the words of affirmation kind of a thing. So I feel like, I'm almost like Shallow Al. I got those love languages. But when I began to try to express my love to Dana, as Dana said, we almost always primarily express love in the ways that we want to receive it. And so you can imagine what my expression of my love to my wife was. The first 5 or 7 years of our marriage, I tried to give her tons and tons of words of affirmation, tons and tons of physical touch, as much as she would allow. And I thought, and it shocked me, absolutely shocked me, guys, when I came home about 7 years into our marriage and she expressed to me that she didn't feel loved. She actually said, "You don't love me." And I was like, how can you say that? I have told you I loved you every day of our marriage. And I've said it with conviction. And I have given you physical expressions of that love as often as you would allow. And yet what I didn't understand is that she had a completely different set of love languages. And when you begin to scratch a place that does not itch, it eventually turns red and then becomes an irritant and starts to hurt. And the very thing I was doing that I thought expressed love to her actually expressed something else. This was revolutionary for me because I do love her and wanted her to know it. And these have been helpful for us. Her love languages are, first, acts of service. It is almost beyond comprehension to me. Seriously, that taking out the trash says I love you. It is
does.
almost beyond comprehension. That checking the air in her tires, changing the oil in her car, washing the car, doing things of service for her, says to her in a very loud way, I love you. That is so hard for me to get around. It's not romantic in any way for me. But I have learned that I want to express love to her in ways that scream to her that I love her, that continue to affirm the fact that I do love her. Acts of service and quality time. We have a joke around our house that whenever we get together with the kids and with people that we say, let's just sit around the table and look into one another's eyes. Which the three of us boys all go, bleh, gag. But we say, let's do it because we know Dana loves it. Now, it's not really just sitting around looking, but it's okay that we get together and we don't accomplish anything. It's not centered around a hobby or an activity or an interest, or we don't play a game that somebody wins. It's okay with her just to spend time together, talking about what we think, what we feel, what we're wrestling with. There is nothing romantic about that for me, except for that it's romantic for her. And it expresses love to her. And so I'm trying to learn that those two areas are areas that actually express love to her, even though they're very different from how I would want love expressed to me. The next area, after you've looked at the 5 love languages, by the way, I talked to 2 couples last night who told us they had never heard of the love languages. And I just would implore you, if you've not done the work to try to figure out what love languages are, not only for your spouse, but for the significant relationships in your life, you really are you're probably scratching where somebody doesn't itch. And you can't figure out why they don't just rise up and sing your praise. Next is fears. Fears are the kinds of things that break intimacy. They're the kinds of things that block it. The fear of being hurt, the fear of being rejected, the fear of failure, the fear of not being able to perform or meet some kind of standard. It is absolutely critical that if you're going to be a great lover, that you would understand these things about your spouse. The kinds of things that are deep inside of them that take a while to come out. And let me just say that guys aren't great at letting you know what they're afraid of. In fact, we would probably like to act like we're not afraid of anything. And so whenever you get insight into something that's a recurring fear in a man's life, gals, you have got a window into their soul. Because every man in this room is a poser. Let's just get it out. We're all deeply afraid that you're going to find out something about us and not like us as men. So whenever you get insight into that, you've just got a window into the soul. And don't use it flippantly. Because those kind of fears, if they're not kind of nourished and helped along, they will block intimacy. And then finally, passions. And this has actually been a little bit of a struggle for us, because I am the kind of a person that likes everything. That's not true, but it just kind of seems like I've got more hobbies than I can maintain. I read something and I immediately am interested in it. I want to run towards it and drop something else. Where Dana gives her affections much more slowly. And so slow sometimes that she's not even sure she likes it. And so to find the areas, they show up when you find out when something's taken away and there's deep hurt. Now you know you found an area of passion for someone. When something is threatened and there's this defensiveness around it, now you know you've got something that really does matter to the person, and you need to guard those passions and give them opportunities to express themselves. To be a great lover, we talk to folks all of the time, and I would tell you that I don't know what you thought when you came in, if there was going to be some kind of physical instruction about being a great lover. 99.9, and certainly there are things that happen physically that block intimacy, sexual intimacy especially, and if that's true, I think you should get medical attention on that. But for 99.9% of the folks, what's holding them back from being great lovers has nothing to do with physical aspects at all. You've got all the tools and they all fit. What's blocking you is your inability to express and receive love in ways that matter, and to build the kind of trust around the fears that block the intimacy that you have. So we would encourage you to pay attention to these kinds of things as well. And then, best friends. You're up.
So you don't only in your marriage want to be great lovers, you want to be best friends too. Steve and I have been married over 31 years now, and there are no kids in the house, and we have a lot of time alone. Some of you are like, oh, when is that day going to ever happen? But it will. And if you haven't developed the friendship in your marriage, then you sit there like strangers. And so that part has to continue to be developed, friends like you were before you were married and as you grow, because things change along the way. Having related hobbies together is always a great, finding things and interest and common things that you want to do together is a great way to continue the friendship. But one of the other things is to begin to continue to know some things about your spouse, or your friend, or your child. This can go with all kinds of relationships. But to begin to know them more so that you can continue to develop them and help them to be all that God wants them to be. And so here are 4 questions, 4 areas that you might want to dig a little bit deeper in your relationships to see, how does this person do these things? How do they think in these ways? And to develop your friendship in that way. And the first one is, how do you face challenges? Challenges come into all of our lives. We face them in different ways. If you have kids, a key question and one way to figure this out is, how do you parent? And this is a way that you can kind of say, okay, how do I parent? And this will help me to know, because kids are challenging in every area, great challenges and really hard challenges too. But are you an initiator or are you a responder? And here's some things that an initiator does. An initiator goes after the problem. An initiator likes action. They like to pioneer things. They're self-confident. They're competitive. And they want to take charge. They want to say, you know, he who hesitates is the one who's going to lose. So let's move into that problem. A responder is one who kind of is a little bit more waiting for the challenges to come to them. They're a little bit more cautious, more stable, more thoughtful, and they say something like this: look before you leap, kind of a thing. So as your challenges come into your lives, if you're more skewed towards the initiator or the responder, you might be frustrating one another or not even understanding one another because you don't get this. Now, you don't have to be all of one. Steve would say it's almost like he's all on one side of all of these things. But I would say I have moved into being a little bit more of an initiator. I'm usually the responder. Steve's the initiator. You probably could have figured that out without us telling you that. But I'm not way on the edge. I would say I'm probably, somewhere, not quite in the middle, moving towards the responder. But I'm definitely more thoughtful about things. I would say, wait, hold on. Let's even figure out if there is a problem before we solve it. And Steve's jumping right in to try to figure something out. And so knowing that about your spouse helps develop the friendship so that you can understand each other better and encourage each other in those ways. And also work with one another in these. You can have real conflict in these areas if you don't understand this about one another, and then work together with each other on these. The second one here is, how do you interact with people? Now, this is not whether you like people or not. This is how do you, mainly the key question here, or the key word, is energy. How do you gain your energy? Do you gain energy in times of stress by being around people or by being alone, more alone? If you are an extrovert, then you gain that energy from being around people. And it just revives you, and you have a greater sense of hope because of that. If you're an introvert, that means that you need more alone time to be able to be rejuvenated and energized and to be able to continue on the journey that God has for you. could we take a vote? Which one's the extrovert? And which one's the introvert? So again, we're pretty opposite on these. If we're in a time of real difficulty, I have to have time alone. I mean, totally alone, and I don't really even want Steve in the whole house, kind of a thing. It's not just in a room. It's like, oh, I got to be all by myself. So I have periods where I go off by myself a lot, and Steve has had to learn how to give me the freedom to do that because he understands that I'm a better person because of it. I'm a better wife because of it. I'm a better mother because of it. And then Steve is an extrovert, and he wants to be with people all of the time. And so he always, he would always prefer that I go along with him. Now, he understands the spiritual life, and he understands that he needs to be by himself too. But having a party, being around people, after today, he will be tons more energized than he was this morning when he got up, and I will have to have a little bit of recovery time. So just know that about one another.
It's quite amazing, actually, that when Dana first came to me, maybe 5 years into our marriage, maybe less than that, and she came and she said, I need to get away. And I said, great, where are we going? And she said, no, you don't understand. I need to get away from you.
I didn't say that.
I mean, she wants to get away from everybody. And at first, my feelings were hurt because I don't want to be alone. I've got my own issues about stuff, but I don't want to be alone. And she wants to be completely, totally alone. It's not good enough that I give her a room in the house. She has to have the whole house. And so but I have learned that just as I gain energy and have my tank refilled by being with people and being challenged in that area, that she, strangely enough, gets the same kind of energy by being alone. And you have to understand that because you'll work against one another if you don't. Thirdly, you might ask yourself, this is what you would need to know, is how do you make decisions? And the continuum there is feeler and thinker. A feeler evaluates on an emotional level. It asks, how will this make me feel? How will this make others feel? A thinker is more logical, like what's right, what's fair, what will have the best results. And a good key question is, how do you shop? I mean, when you go and shop, do you make a list? You check it several times, and then you go and you shop the list. When I go to shop, and I don't get to very often, and you're about to know why, I don't go and shop a list. I shop a store. I just do. When I go in, I start on either the far right or the far left, and I go up and down every single aisle. Because they might have something I didn't know they had. And I just pretty much go through the thing and say what looks cool, what feels good. I mean, when I shop for her at Christmas or other times when I'm trying to get something, I walk through stores and just look at the displays, which is always frustrating because once you say, I like that combo, where's that? Well, you can't get that. The sweater's gone. You can get the pants. That's all you can get. And so, but that's how do you come to make decisions? Whether you're a feeler or a thinker, this is a big deal. It's a big deal because as you've got a tough decision to make as a couple, one person is kind of going on this feeling and all this stuff that you can't really measure, and the other person's trying to get more information and becomes real analytical. And it's frustrating for one another because like one seems like they just don't even really give it any thought, and the other one's like, come on, loosen up, kind of a deal. All right, fourth is how do you deal with change? How do you deal with change? A structured person would be the kind of person who says, know the plan and work the plan. Where an unstructured person might say, let's play it by ear. Now, a way to know this is, how do you vacation? When you plan a vacation, there are some of you in the room who get out Google Earth. You know exactly how far you'll go. When somebody asks to stop to use the restroom, you say, no, we'll be stopping in 14 minutes. When we hit this town, in 14 minutes, we're going to receive 11.3 gallons of gas. And make sure you go then, because we're not going to stop for another hour and 40 minutes. And you got all that worked out, and that's wonderful. I mean, you like all that. It's actually fun for you to plan things like that and watch that plan be executed. And then there are some of us who say, for vacation, hey, let's go south. Where are you staying? Not sure. What are you going to do down there? Not sure. We're just going to go south and see.
What do I pack?
Yeah.
Not sure.
Not sure. Now, we have a history full of vacations that have gone incredibly bad
That's not that.
because I've been in this hurry to kind of, discover where we're going that I forgot to tie a suitcase down on the top of the car once. I forgot tent poles. That was a great vacation when I forgot the tent poles. The tent just will not work without the pole. I don't care how nice it is. So in these different ways to understand, because listen, this really does show up when you start to talk about the times when how do you relieve stress? This shows up in how you make these kind of decisions, how you work through things. How do you recover physically? I mean, I actually recover physically by doing something physical with people, where Dana's recovery method is doing nothing with no one. Now, not exclusively, but pretty much. So you can imagine that if we're both tired and I say, hey, let's call so-and-so and go do, and she's like, no, how about you call them and you go do? And so you've got to be able to understand how you recover, how you're motivated, what kinds of things really encourage you. I mean, great vacation time can go terribly south if you don't understand some of these kind of questions and how. And here's the wonderful thing about being married 31 years. It's not wrong that she's different than me. I used to think it was. And I thought that if she hangs around me enough, she'll eventually change.
I have some.
Some. And I have some.
Absolutely.
But the reality is that the differences spice stuff up. God very purposefully made her the way she is. The teachings of Scripture are without question in that being true. And he very purposely made me and everyone in this room exactly the way you are. It's not wrong that you're different. It's just different. And until you acknowledge that, you'll never celebrate the differences you have. And if you don't celebrate them, you won't be best friends. By the way, best friends become best friends around usually going through something very hard. And so that's the wonderful process of how things happen. Okay, now, we have given you a text number, and they're saying up there that they have questions. And so, in fact, they're real excited about them, so that kind of scares me. They're like going, yeah, I have a question. And I'm like, oh, no. They're probably up there going, okay, let's see what he does with this one. All right, let's try one. Let's try one. Any tips or recommendations on welcoming and surviving our first baby? Nope.
You will survive, I promise.
That's what I would say is you will survive. It is going to be a source of great joy. I will tell you, though, that a lack of sleep is a very real force and problem in relationships. A very real place. A very real thing. Elijah, in the Old Testament, Elijah has this great battle, and he fights this great battle, and he gets out of the battle, and he's trying to figure out what to do, and he's just become suicidal, the text says. And God says, lie down and have a nap. You'll be much better once you sleep. So a lot of things become like magnified because of a lack of sleep. Just encourage your husband to engage and help with the process of caring for the child. Do better than I did, and know that you will get through it. You got anything?
I would just say, too, make sure that all the focus doesn't go on the baby. I mean, your relationship, the best thing you can do for your kids is to have a good relationship yourself. And so to continue to focus in on your relationship, even though there are times within every marriage that different periods of time where that time will be different and it will look different. For the moms, I would say husbands, fathers, it won't always be the focus that's there, that's in that as that new baby is there. But for a while, the mom's attention just goes completely to the baby. It will come back to you. Don't get too jealous along that way, but just give a little bit of freedom there. And then moms, wives, be reminded that the most important person in your life should be your spouse, your husband. And that is a great benefit to the kid too.
Good point.
So.
Good point. Next. What can you do to feel connected with your spouse while your children are young? I think this is a very real problem. Honestly, the energy that it takes to raise young children is pretty daunting, and you really don't have a whole lot left for a spouse, and you've got to take care of a kid who's screaming, and your spouse is probably more sophisticated in expressing their needs than that, and so it's easier to put them off. But eventually, those needs, there might be screaming from them as well. So I would encourage you just to kind of do what Dana just said. And I would also, your kids are amazingly resilient, way more than you think. And I know that you feel like the most godly Christian thing is to make sure that you're with your kids as much as you can and all those things. And I agree with all that. But they'll survive an evening a month with somebody else. Just make sure that somebody else is safe and will take care of your kids well. Pay them whatever you got to pay them, whatever you can afford, and get after it. And make sure that you get time alone with your spouse as well.
If the kids think they're always the center of attention in your home, not a healthy thing for them to think growing up. They want to be a great attention at home, but not the center of everything going on. So, make them a part of the family, not the main focus.
Okay, what do you got next? As a single man, how can I objectively identify the quest for a union in a wholesome Christian way and not as a quick fix to the problem of alienation? I was going to say something that's going to be offensive, but don't talk that way to women, first of all. How can I objectively identify the quest for a union? Anyway, but I get it.
Maybe to other men. The women would probably understand that. The men did not.
The men are like, what? Just find a wife, dude. What? I think it's really, we talked about this at length last week, and we talked about the myth of the soulmate. And if you didn't get last week's message, listen to it on the internet. Grab a CD out there. They'll have some out there, I think, from last week. But the pressure of finding the soulmate for you just puts unbelievable pressure on finding the right person instead of being the right person. So I say it this way all of the time. Single people, this is my best advice. Run hard, fast as you can after God. Run as hard and fast as you can after God. Submitting your life to Him and being a Christ follower and following there. And then look around and see if there's anybody of the opposite sex keeping up. If they are, and you like the way they look, date them. But if you have to turn around or slow down or run backwards to find somebody, you will compromise some things that will make you miserable. The scriptures say it is better to live on the corner of a roof than to live with a contentious woman, but I'd say spouse, contentious spouse. No wife is better than the bad wife. And so I would encourage you that I know you want to be married. Marriage is a good thing. It's a good idea. It's great to the right person. Make sure you're becoming the right person and then look around and see what happens. Don't spend all of your energy searching for the right person. Great question.
I would just say, too, is that married people feel alone. They feel all the feelings that you feel as a single person. It's just what our situation is now. Of course, I would choose to be married, but what I'm saying is it does not fix anything. if God is the one who is the one to bring us all the things that we really need deep down inside. So don't be looking for a partner to fix what is broken in you. Doesn't happen. God does that. But the marriage partner is the one, is a beautiful thing, like Steve said, but it only enhances what's already going on in your life. It doesn't change everything.
Would it be good for engaged couples to talk about love language before they are married?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that question because I'm done with it. Next. Do you have a system or process to remind yourselves of these love languages, both as individuals and as couples? It's become, I will tell you, it has become part of our vernacular as a couple. It's a big deal. And it's a big deal for us now because I personally blew this so bad when we were first married that when I saw this, it was like revolutionary for me. I mean, I was scratching at a place that did not itch. And the more I scratched, the harder I scratched, the worse it got. The more I tried to express love in my own love languages, the truth is, the more used she felt. I mean, and she began to think that just any old body will do. When I'm filtering.
Good. Whoa. He's speaking my love language now.
Filter? Because I said something last night. She said, don't say that. I would say it this way. I'm not just horny. I'm trying to express love. But it feels like I'm just horny. And it feels like it over and over and over again. So the very thing I'm actually doing to express love is expressing exactly the opposite. And so I don't need a reminder for this. I guess it's become so real because I was so poor at it. The last thing I want my wife to feel is that she's just an object to satisfy my urges. That is repulsive to me. And so, out of my love for her, I'm learning that I do that.
But I probably didn't understand my love languages at the beginning either. And so it was a process for us to learn. And that's one of the reasons we talk about this a lot. And the other thing from my perspective is I had to learn how to verbalize what I needed. Wives, we know, women, we want them to know what to do without us telling them. I wanted him to know that when that trash was full, it was supposed to go out without me having to ask him.
It wasn't full.
It just wasn't. So I could either get mad about it, which I did quite often early on, or I could say, I could begin to verbalize what felt like love to me so he could learn it and then get better at it. And that's been definitely a process. But there might be early on, if you're at this now and just learning those, there might be some good key reminders you could do for one another. Yeah. A simple phrase, a simple thought, because it doesn't come naturally. If that's not your love language, it doesn't necessarily come naturally. So you do have to work at it.
Yeah, and this too, one of the things that helped me with this, and this is a little bit selfish, but it's the reality, is that taking out the trash is not romantic to me. But when I learned it was romantic for her, I'm interested. Okay? If she feels loved, I'm better loved. I know that sounds a little selfish, but the truth of the matter is that all of our motives are a combination of both self-serving and selfless. And as I expressed her love languages to her, she began to be more free to express my love languages to me. And I was interested in that. I mean, honestly. Okay, I think that's it, unless you got one upstairs one more, she says. Okay. What if a spouse is not capable of or willing to show love? I believe that there are things from our past, fears that are yet to be discovered or uncovered. That's why I said the fears are the things that block intimacy. And there are times when it is not unusual at all for a couple to have to go through many years of marriage and then get to a point where something's blocking them. Something's blocking them. They kind of can identify it, but they can't really get around it. Now, in every other area of life that matters, we receive coaching. I mean, certainly your marriage matters more than a tennis match, a golf game, or any kind of sport, but there's not a professional athlete in the world that doesn't have a coach. Your businesses, when you go into areas, you have people who coach you along. There are people making billions of dollars every year training people and helping people move forward in every area of life almost. And yet we think that this deal ought to just work out. We ought to be smart enough to figure it out on our own. And it feels like an admission to weakness when we get blocked. There was a time, 12 years into our marriage or so, that we got blocked and we needed to get some coaching. And once I saw it, we did not hesitate to make sure that we got that. And so I would tell you that it's not unusual to have something happen in a person's lives, either before you were married or during your marriage, that begins to block things. But I will tell you that God can overcome these things if you'll be willing to be honest about them and invite Christ into the middle of it. Now, if you've got a spouse who's broken and doesn't want anything to do with Christ, I'm not very optimistic about what's going to happen. But the power of Christ in our brokenness, in everyone's brokenness, is amazing what it can do. And we have seen marriages that quite honestly have come in and talked with us that on the surface we said, they ain't got a chance. And we have seen Jesus come into the middle of it and heal things that we never believed could be healed. And so I would say if you're in a situation where it's blocked and you can't move forward, get some help. Find a marriage therapist. Find a Christian counselor that can walk you through and help identify what's blocking you and help you move through it. No shame at that. In fact, that's the wise thing, the very wise thing to do. May your week be full of the reminders of how good God has been in your life. And may that thought dominate your week in such a way that you are filled with thanksgiving, praising God for who He is and what He's done on your behalf. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for coming.